Hey, everybody. It is I, Hope Giselle, Hope Disguise, and I'm coming at you all with another episode of Can We Talk? And I'm super excited about this particular episode because, as you all know, I'm all about bridging the gap between trans and cis women. And this particular Black cis woman has been all over my radar. She's been shooting all of the fireworks all up and through my mind space for a couple of different reasons. Outside of her just amazing poetry, number one, her intelligence is unmatched by most people, as most Black women's are. And I could not wait to open up conversation and dialogue with this young woman who does parking lot pimpin' Fridays, which is one of the things that I look forward to every Friday. Sometimes they're a little late, but they're always right on time. And I really appreciate her for, opening up the space to have conversations on a multitude of different things. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce some of you and welcome to some of you all, Miss Lyneezy, please. Let me add her to the feed. There she is. Hey. I am beyond excited to have you here. First and foremost, explain to the people who have never heard of you, have no idea what I was just talking about, don't know what parking lot pimping is. Just explain to them, who you are and what you do.
Got it. Well, first, it's Lyneezy Bogues, and that's totally okay because I spent, I don't know, maybe 2 to 3 years in the classroom with kids calling me Miss Bougie, Miss Bad and Bougie, Miss Bogus, Miss all kinds of crazy things, and that's totally okay. It's totally fine. But no, so I do parking lot pimping. It's a little Friday series. You ain't have to put me out for posting late sometimes. I'd be struggling. No, but so it's like a 2 to 3 minute post I do every Friday that compacts some useful information that, as of recent, is relevant to whatever current events are going on throughout the week. It started off as something that I wanted to do to bring issues that I thought were pertinent to Black communities. I don't like to use words like the Black community because if it's one thing they taught us over and over, and throughout my schooling, I also have a master's in African American Studies, and I went to Spelman College for undergrad, studying psychology and Black studies, but it's that Blackness is not monolithic. So there are definitely commonalities between Black communities and different types of Black people in those communities. But there's things that I think are overarching themes that we need to discuss, we need to get to the heart of, because while Black people have so many rights to complain about things that the rest of the world does to us, there's unfortunately a lot of internalized racism, a lot of internalized hate that we project on each other for our differences. And that's actually how my series started. I talked about issues concerning Black women, issues concerning Black queer folk, which I would like to speak more on that, which I'm sure we will get to in this conversation. But and as I gained a little bit of traction, I just started talking about the election, and that's been something at the heart and minds and souls and spirits of Black people for the past like 6 months now. Like, we've been ready to get this man up out of here, you know. So just a contextualizing a lot of that information in history, because that's what I have academic background in. So, yeah.
First and foremost, I love it. I love all of it. And I hate that this is even a thing that we give accolade for, but I love degreed Black women.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate that it's one of those things where, like, because I find that, and I guess this is like the beginning and the opener of the conversation, right? I find that when we're talking about white women or when we're in spaces with women of other cultures, even when they are a part of minority cultures, it's not this celebration of a woman who got a master's or sought out to get another degree. It's just like, oh, this is what expected of white women. It's expected of these other races of women to be successful and to do whatever. But in our community, every time Black women make like the smallest of steps, and it's not to say that school is small, because I'm an advocate for school. I love education. I think that everybody, within reason, if it's a part of what your mindset is, I think that everybody should go and get some form of higher education. But I hate the idea that when Black women succeed at it, that there is this horn that goes off as if we just won $1 million, as if we weren't expected to succeed, as if we weren't supposed to do good. We weren't supposed to be able to walk across that stage, or, you know, like we're not supposed to be aiming towards higher education and doctorates and all of those things, even though we live every day knowing Black female doctors, knowing Black women doctors, knowing Black women that maneuver through spaces of academia. And so I think, first and foremost, how do you feel about that? Have you ever had an experience where, you know, you said, I have a master's, and like there's been, I guess, some almost like this forced conversation of, oh my God, that's amazing?
To be quite honest, I have not. I don't like people the most. Well, people say that all the time, I think people take offense, but I think it just means that we like to stay to ourselves for the most
Right.
part. But so I haven't really been in situations with people who don't know much about me or not in positions to learn about me to have those kind of conversations. Um, but I do feel in the type of career path I went on initially, which was teaching, especially in the state that we're in, that's kind of like what everybody does. And a lot of people get into it because you don't have to have a master's, or it's just kind of like an easy thing to do with the requirements. And so I would definitely get a lot of, yeah, so when you get your master's, you'll do this, this, that, and the other. You'll be able to get this. And I'm like, oh, I already have my master's degree. Or especially teaching an African American history course, like I definitely got the, oh, so where are you getting your information? Or parents calling in, like, so yeah, you're going to show them movies? Oh, no, I have a curriculum. Like, I know what I'm talking about. And that brings up a whole nother conversation just as to how these courses of minority studies and issues in public school kind of get passed off to these teachers who will do it for a hobby, or will do it just because it's a class that's available that somebody has to teach, and not really have the background to give our students the language and the information and the proper context for learning about key individuals, events, or whatever, what have you. But something that I have gotten on the flip side of that is that, unfortunately, it's also set up to where our families are programmed to think that way as well. When we do make it in education, or when we do get our second degree, it's something for us to brag on and talk about, because unfortunately there are a lot of things stacked against our communities to make sure that we can't enter those spaces. So when that one person gets out and does, it's a whole hurrah. And I talk a lot in one of the articles, someone interviewed me for Voyage ATL, that I come from. My parents' families do not come from a lot. Like, being in very small towns, being limited to certain communities, or not branching out past where they are, like, I've always felt like I had that kind of chip on my shoulder, like, oh, I have to do this for them. Like, it's not just about me. So I do think it's like a double-edged sword. Unfortunately, a lot of Black women who are super exceeding these expectations, which we do every day, you're absolutely right, we're also doing it for more than just ourselves, and we do champion the people we hold on our backs. However, there is also that side of just being assuming that there is a level of inconsistency or incongruity in conversation that you might be getting spoken down to, because someone assumes that you don't have what you have, or that when you do, oh wow, that's so amazing. One thing I have gotten a lot is, when you used to be able to sit outside in restaurants, I have two younger brothers, and we would sit, we would eat, we would mind our business, we would leave. And I kid you not, 3 out of 5 times, there's an older white woman who comes by, and she looks at me because she assumes I'm the mother for whatever reason. But she says, your boys are so well behaved. As opposed to what? How are they not supposed to be? And so I think what a lot of those comments come from is like, what is your base thinking of me that you think this is a compliment, and not a norm? Because just as you say, with white women, like, there is no celebration in the same way that it is for Black communities or for Black women, because these are things that are run of the mill. They are the American standard, and I guess it's just assumed that Black women operate underneath that American standard, or having to climb up that American standard. So it's tricky.
I've always, I think I've always been able to identify with the idea that there's this expectation and then there's the reality for what people think based around whatever, your congruencies with the world are. And so there's the expectation that because my hair is blue today, that the things that are going to come out of my mouth don't have substance. There's an expectation that because you are wearing a natural hairstyle, that the things that are going to come out of your mouth are going to be reminiscent of an NDR reverse, right?
Yeah.
And I think that what people fail to realize is that while both of those things can be true at one time, having the expectation and then forcing me to feel it because of what you personally think would make you comfortable is that bullshit. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of the time when you're dealing with situations like the one that you said, like 3 out of 5, that's a lot of
Yeah.
time. That's a good majority of the time that you spend going, what the fuck, in the face of white. And I think that as Black people, we do a lot of the what the fuck. But I think what a lot of Black men miss is that while there's this overt aggression towards Black men, Black women don't get the overt aggression. It's the microaggressions. And those are so annoying. I would rather you come up and tell me that you think that I'm a ghetto Black bitch and, offer to fight me than to come up and offer me what isn't a compliment, but what you see as a critique and criticism of me being one of the good ones. And that is like the most backhanded thing that I think happens to Black women that we don't talk about, that we don't really speak about outside of our women's circles, outside of the beauty shops, and outside of those late night conversations in the girls' night, with grandma and them in the kitchen on Thanksgiving, where we just, we're harping to each other. And I'm happy that it's happening now, because people need to understand that as Black women, there's a lot that happens mentally, verbally, emotionally, that we have to deal with every single day that affects us physically, right?
Yes.
While we may not be getting beat at the same rates, while we may not experience the blatant brutality that Black men face, there is a strength in being able to have to hold your shit together every time go to the Target.
Um, I was in preparation for this training I'm about to do with this company on like justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I've been reading this book called Black Fatigue, and it's by Mary Frances Winters. I actually have it up here, but she breaks it down into 3 different groups. One, she says we should stop calling them microaggression because of the totality of the impact these things have on us from day to day. And her entire, one of the entire sections of her book talks about Black women dealing with microaggressions. And I forget the third one, but they're like micro insults, micro assaults, because changing the verbiage and how we look at microaggression also requires us to take ownership, not us, but the people who inflict them, requires them to take ownership on what these things actually do to us on a daily basis. Because the strength that you speak of, like, you don't understand. And unfortunately, it happens so often in the workplace where we have to buckle down and say, I can't go off on this white woman today. I can't reach across the table and slap this woman for what she just said to me today. And I always go back to this one example. I was teaching my kids one day a lesson on microaggressions, and they didn't understand. They were like, well, if somebody's racist, they're just racist. And I said, well, it's a different type of approach to it. And I gave an example. I started working at this school. It was the first year. I think it might have been a month or 2 in. And I taught U.S. history and I taught African American history as well. And in the U.S. history class, we were talking about, I think, the transatlantic slave trade. And one of the white teachers had mentioned that she was watching Amistad to see which clips she could show her students as some type of resource. And apparently it was on her mind. Mind you, I'm in the midst of a parent-teacher email debacle, trying to handle my business. And she says, yeah, man, I walked by so-and-so's classroom the other day and it looked like a slave ship. And I was like, ma'am, you cannot say things like that. But I'm new here. I'm in the midst of doing whatever it is I'm doing. I give a look to whomever is our leader in this group at the moment. Like, we're going to have a conversation later because that's not okay. And it became this big deal to do. She came and apologized to me later. But it's like, I don't know why there is no wall up there or where there's no boundary, but it's just an unthinking type of insidious type of behavior that allows you to project that type of language in a room where I'm evidently Black. Like, I'm a Black woman. We're talking about the transatlantic slave trade, which, I don't know, might trigger you to think about what this era meant for Black people. And we're at a predominantly Black school, which is why you said it. But what makes you think that it is appropriate? Now, granted, this woman and I had enough conversation to be cordial moving forward, but it was just such a shocking interaction for me, because while I had experienced micro insults or looks or asking about my hair, that type of stuff was normal, but just to come out, and this is someone who teaches our children, you know? So that's my take on microaggressions. Like, we should stop. We should just call them aggressions. They are what they are. They have such a large impact on our thinking and our processes of keeping ourselves together. Yeah.
There is there was an article recently, right after Trump lost the election.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember somebody felt it not robbery to post that there was this woman, I cannot, for the life of me, I can't remember her name, but I remember like bookmarking the article. But they gave the details on this woman, and they said her name, and she's an educator and works at this school, and this school is predominantly Black, and she has these credentials and all of these things. And then they also listed the fact that she's an avid Trump supporter, that she's done X, Y, and Z, that she's also been known to do blah 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 blah. And the basis of the article was to remind people that, like I said before, two things can be true at one time. This person is an educator. So imagine what the Black students in that classroom have to experience and endure every single day while this is all going on. And then imagine the fear of going to class after this candidate loses, right? And imagine the idea that this person doesn't have a good moral compass, as we know a lot of the folks who support Trump don't. And what does that say about the futures of the Black folk that are going to be in her class, that have been in her class? What does that say about the ways in which the aggressions, right, have come across to Black women, because white women tend to fear Black men, right? And so what about the Black women students that have been in that classroom that have had to endure the aggression of this person because she does not care for the livelihood of Black women and Black people as a whole? What have those conversations been like? What have those lectures been like? And then it leads me down this rabbit hole of, have there been complaints? Have there been, parent-teacher meetings? Have parents gone and been able to speak up about, this behavior? Has there been any behavior at all outside of this article?
Mm-hmm.
And how does she carry herself amongst our children? And I think that it's something that we don't talk often enough about, is the idea that bigotry and hatred and classism and sexism and misogynoir do not just live on these streets. They live in spaces that continue to prevent Black people, and especially Black women, from being able to progress in society in ways that are going to be beneficial not only to just the community, but to our livelihood and the way that we're able to progress. And so when you said, like, I'm an educator and we were in this space, and the fact that she said this, I wonder if she had made that comment to a student.
Let me tell you, the kids immediately knew who I was talking about. I didn't name any names just for the sake of professionalism. They're like, but was it this person? Because she said this in class, and oh, she said this in class. So they are automatically able to make those type of connections. And it's just really unfortunate, because I I don't want to use the excuse that there are good white folk, because even good and well-meaning white folk make bad decisions, you know? And I
Yes.
think as a part of she and I reconciling that incident, she took ownership of that, which I appreciated. Like, there's certain jokes that you don't make, certain things that you don't say, but it takes one time for someone to reveal to you where you've messed up, for you to realize all the times you've messed up. And when we have people who are just ignorant to this type of information, again, I cannot see how. um, Ignorant to this type of information, and ignorant to the effect that they have on people in their environments for long periods of time, like, it reflects on those generations once they become in this position. Like, what do they say to their students? What do they do? What things do they internalize that you said that hurt them? Like, what prevents them from having meaningful conversations about race with other white people? Like, being an educator, when I was in school, one thing they repeated to us all the time is that a child may never remember your name, but they'll remember how you make them feel. And I'm definitely biased because I just came out of this profession, but teachers really mold and shape our kids. And like, even when you talk about young Black women in these spaces, like, it's not even just race, and we know this because of intersectionality, but it's not even just race. But the things that I saw about how young Black women were treated in schools for their bodies, like, it was so heartbreaking. Like, I had so many like impromptu therapy sessions in my classroom with young adult women who were being sexualized at school and abused at home, you know, or have been abused at home. But schools, I could talk about them all day, and we don't have to base our conversation about that today. But it's just like, I started doing what I was doing because I recognized that what I had to offer, the environments I was in did not accept it. They were not as welcoming of it. They were not as progressive as they thought they were, because the things that I talked about in my classroom were things like rape culture and sexual assault, and having these conversations with the young men, and just even not saying yes ma'am and okay when things were brought to me about how I would dress or how I would look and how young men would speak about me. You know, it's not my problem, you know, and I'm here to be a pillar. And so what I wanted to do was bring that to larger audiences and be able to say what the fuck I want to say, because the censorship that goes on in these spaces where our young people are being cultivated is the same type of censorship that promotes sexism and misogynoir and homophobia and transphobia. So yeah, it's quite ridiculous to think about the things. Like, there's never a day that I'm like, man, I wish I could be teaching in a classroom again, because like, anybody has the capacity to be a teacher. Yeah, especially a time now where people are listening more and more willing to learn, like, just conversations and being exposed and listening is what helps people to progress. Like, for instance, I'm going to start listening to your podcast regularly now. Because I think it's such an excellent tool and resource, especially the way that you allow people from different walks of life and different perspectives to engage in meaningful conversation that doesn't necessarily promote a cancel culture, but just allows free thinking and movement, and understanding. The read. My friends put me on the read like maybe a year or two ago, and like, it just completely opened my mind. Like, I've never been a person, well, I can't say never, because I was once a child and didn't understand everything, but I've never been a person who has been unaccepting of people in my spaces because of who they are and what they identify with. But just listening to conversations, even people writing in listener letters, listening to Crystal and Kid Fury talk about their own experiences, it's just like, wow, people are just people at the end of the day. You know, there's vocabulary you have to learn, but still, like, listening really changed my perspective and how I was able to be an advocate and an effective ally for communities I don't necessarily identify with.
I think that that's always amazing, especially when I hear it from Black women. Um, and especially Black women that are not part of the community in any way. Oftentimes, when we're having some of these conversations, sometimes we're dealing with Black women who are lesbians or who are fluid sexually or whatever the case may be. And so, when we're talking about the idea of cisgender Black women who identify as heterosexual and don't have the scope of,
Mm-hmm.
well, I'm fluid in this way, and so I kind of get it, you know? And
Mm-hmm.
those are the things that make me really excited about it. And I hate to admit this, but it's one of those things where when I reached out and you responded in this warm and inviting, just like, girl, okay, like, hop in the DM, like, I got you, kind of way, it took me aback. But not because I wasn't expecting for your attitude to be chipper about it, but because I was like, okay, now at this point, I have to wonder based on the audience. Because I think that even when, and what a lot of folks don't realize is that on these social interwebs, regardless of who you are, people still base your image off of the aesthetics and the things that they like about you that they then pull you into, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so just like there is this aesthetic about you that is very pro Black woman, that is very, natural, that is very like, here and transparent about Blackness as a
Mm-hmm.
whole. And when people group that together, they group that Blackness with anti-trans. They group that Blackness with, homophobia. They group that Blackness with anti-femininity in men. And so it's one of those things where whenever I talk to women who kind of sort of fit that mold, even if I know them to be different, I'm always wondering about how they're going to appear for their audience.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we don't know anything else as influencers or as people who create content, we know who our audience is. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we don't agree with who our audience is, but we have no control over who watches and really stands with our stuff. And so some of my conversations lately with my cis female friends have just been in conversation with other women who don't necessarily agree, or when you have the audience of other women who don't necessarily agree that, you know, Hope is my girl. I love her. There's nothing, I see her as one of us. At what point does it become, or does it ever become uncomfortable to be the one person in the room saying that?
Um, I think it's always uncomfortable, but what I've known about myself is that I don't grow unless I'm uncomfortable. I don't move forward unless I'm uncomfortable. Um, I'm going to say this quote and then I'm going to talk about just a little bit of my journey with this very topic. But when I was in college, I was on a band dance line. And if you know anything about marching bands, you have to earn everything just as you would a sorority or whatever. And there was one time we had to do push ups. And one of my sisters, she was always chipper and happy. And she was like, guys, pain is weakness leaving the body. And we would just roll our eyes and be so irritated because we would be hurting, like we would be ready to be done doing push-ups. But I thought about it the other day, just trying to get well once more and take care of myself. Like, if pain is weakness leaving the body, if I'm not willing to experience pain, then I'm okay with being weak. Um, and so that's really been that's really been like a charging mantra for me, because I remember when I first got started, I was very passionate, very serious about expanding my audience, because I'm an artist at the end of the day, and I wanted to do these visuals I'm doing with my poetry and really invest in it. And I was paying these different Instagram pages for ad space and like really thinking about what's going to market my message. And I was like, of all the videos I have so far, like, what is going to be that thing that sets me apart? Or what is going to be that thing that really sparks a conversation? If my mission is to spark conversation where it needs to be sparked, how brave am I going to be when
Mm.
putting this out? And so I chose to do the video I had on Black queer erasure, and the statement I made about Malcolm X in the beginning really brought so much hate towards me, and it was really difficult for me to adjust, because I was going from just a girl with maybe I think I maybe started out with 4,000 followers, like people who are just kind of my immediate circle. I've probably brushed elbows with everybody that follows me right now. So the conversation I'm having, I'm willing to back myself up, or just know that these people know me well enough to know that I mean no animosity or anything like that. But the messages I got were so disappointing and disheartening. I had people who were this pro-Black or Pan-Africanist identity, and I had to stop taking the Pan-African hashtag out of my posts when I would post them, because like I don't want to identify with certain groups. Like, I want to be clear that I'm not pandering to any audience specifically, not even cisgender folks. Like, my message is that we need to root for everybody Black, minorities in general, but like my shtick is everybody Black, because that's what I know and that's what I'm most passionate about. And if I'm doing that, then I can't care if somebody's gonna unfollow me because of something that I say. Like, I can't care if these people, not that followers mean anything to a person's worth, but these people with 300-400 followers coming in my inbox, leaving me voice messages after voice messages after voice message telling me I've sold out to the queer community, or that I've sold out to the white man and he's using me as a pawn to tear down my community. Things that don't make any sense. And like, the indoctrinated language from these people who would think that there are groups for liberation, but are like just hate groups in a different kind of way. And I'm just like, you guys are saying the exact same thing in the exact same format. And you don't even understand how, as an oppressed group, you are working to oppress somebody else. And what is that for? So you can feel superior to somebody else, or so you can distance yourself from something that you feel increases the amount of anti-Blackness you may experience? Or like, if you have a limited viewpoint of what the world is for Black people because you listen to specific doctors or leaders or whatever, what have you, like, I'm not going to knock anybody's experience, But that's one thing that I definitely had to recognize, and it was new to me. It was interesting, and I never would have thought that I would have to separate myself from specific types of Black people if I want to be the type of person that I was. And that discomfort, that needing to lean into what my message is, that needing to harness, because to be transparent, as a cis woman who otherwise wouldn't have any issues or any reason for people to dislike her, it is a bit scary navigating those spaces because of the hate that's put my way. But then I can't for a second dwell in that, because this is just what I'm getting, trying to spread a message of positivity about something that doesn't even necessarily belong to me. What must these people who do identify this way, what must they feel on a daily basis? What fear must they experience? What discomfort, you know? So I think it was funny. I was in a store with my boyfriend because we shop in vintage places. That's a lot of what our like style is. And there was this one shirt on Miles Davis. And I was like, oh, this is so dope. I'm about to get this. And then I remember sitting in some type of talk with Pearl Clegg, and she was reading a piece called Mad at Miles. And I was like, she was mad at Miles for something toxic. Like he was either beating somebody or he raped somebody. I did a quick Google search to reveal that Miles Davis had abused his wife. I didn't really see anything about rape, but I put the shirt right back. And I was like, gotta stand for what I believe in.
Right.
You know? So like it's difficult, it's not easy. And I mean, I don't say it's not easy to play any type of victim, but like it's just as I am experiencing this growth, like there is pain, there's discomfort for me, but like if it's making me stronger as a person, stronger as an activist or as an advocate, then I'm willing to experience that.
Do you think that because I think that that's one of the things that I love to always ask people who are trying to, kind of sort of stand up in their allyship. You are the first person I think that has ever said like, "This is uncomfortable for me as somebody who otherwise I have no reason for people to come at me in the way that they come at me," right? Because there's a difference in people just hating on the fact like, "Oh, she's skinny," or "Oh, she got a weave done and she claims to be whatever." But there's a whole different type of energy when people are coming at you for something that, one, you don't identify with, two, you don't have to necessarily defend, and three, that honestly, unless you seek it out, for the most part, you can kind of sort of steer clear from the entire community if you want to. And people fail to realize that. Like, there are a lot of people in this world who genuinely do not, in the flesh, know somebody who was a part of the community. And it is very easy to kind of sort of steer clear from it, especially these days when everybody is kind of sort of living their truth and like, being overt about it. So it's like, oh, you are cool. Don't want to be friends. But do you feel like now that you've made those statements, and you've gotten a glimpse of kind of sort of the aggression that comes and the violence that sort of comes with that, was it something that almost made you say, I'm never going to do that again?
No. It made me realize that I have to be super responsible about what I say, and I have to be ready to stand up in whatever it is that I said. Um, I worried just a tad as I was getting more traction. I worried about cancel culture, in that I may say something to offend the communities I'm advocating for. And so to do a little bit more research to make sure that what I'm saying, if there's any vocabulary that should be used, that I use it correctly, that type of thing, it just made me more cautious about going about it, but never that I would stop.
I think that that's always a noble thing, because to hear you say it and say it with such like conviction, you were just like, they were coming. And
Yeah.
like, cause I mean, I can't see your inbox, but when you said that, I saw your inbox because
Mm-hmm.
I've had your inbox,
Mm-hmm.
and it's one of those things where as Black people, I think that that's the saddest thing for me sometimes is when my message is so pro Black,
Mm-hmm.
and the only thing that people can focus on is that one comment that
Mm-hmm.
says, "Oh, that's a man." And I think I'll never forget how our community is so great and we come together for each other until. And I
Yeah.
had a moment about probably about 3 years ago at this point. I was up late one night. I went live. no makeup, no, I had my hair in the raggedy bun at the top of my head, and I'm just laying in bed, and I was talking about the idea that I hadn't been in a relationship in a really long time as a trans woman. And somebody ripped it and they put it on their page. But they ripped the part about me being trans, and they left this beautiful piece where I got emotional, cried about the idea that, like, as a Black woman, I didn't feel desired. I didn't feel X, Y, and Z and all of these things. And so I get a tag, and that video had been viewed 100 and something thousand times on that page. And I was just like, wow. And then my heart sank because I was like, okay, but I know these comments are about to be trash. So let me see what's up. And I go through the comments, and it's so affirming, and it's so amazing, and it's so, oh my gosh, she's so beautiful. I don't know why she's crying like this. This is so amazing. Oh my goodness, girl, I've been there too. I'm on the same boat, sis. Men are just like, there are Black men that are out here. You gonna find a king. Da 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 da. It took one person a day later who went and inspected my page because they hadn't tagged me. But when I saw the video from my friend who tagged me, and then the people who posted the video tagged me, somebody went and did their research and was like, oh, y'all noticed a man, right? That's probably why you can't find nobody. And the comments immediately flipped. It went from all of the affirmation, it went from all of the compliments, it went from all of the, oh my God, your skin is so beautiful, your natural hair is so popping, girl, da 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 da, to, well, Black men don't like men. Black men don't want to be da 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 da. You're imitating this thing that you're not, and so that's why you sitting in the bed. Like, all of the insults started to pour in, and I was like, but before y'all knew that, it was all of it was the exact antithesis of this conversation that we're having now.
Yeah.
And why is that a thing? Because obviously, or it should be assumed that I'm not pursuing men that don't want me, right? Or men that, who are openly telling me that they don't want me. I'm pursuing people that, as most Black women are, these guys claim that they want to do X, Y, and Z, and then things go awry and you feel a certain type of way. And that was just one of the many examples that I'm just like, we are so down and so gung-ho for everything Black until that Blackness is also paired with something that we've been taught is weakness, or that we've been taught goes against what our Black ideal should be. And then all of a sudden we flip the script. And I see a lot of that when I saw you post your video, around the LGBT community. There was so much love in all of the other parking lot pimpins, but for some reason, that particular one, the comments were real, like they were real shifty. And I was like, but why?
Yeah. I think it was honestly, I think, a bit better the second time I posted about something in the Black queer community, because the people who follow me are now used to what I talk about. Like, there are also people who support. I think 78% of my followers are women, and then the 22% are men. But I have a lot of my gay friends will tell me, girl, like, the gay stand and da da da. So, like, my audience is generally people who agree with me. But the first one that I did, like, I honestly, I get my heart sinks just a little bit every time I see somebody reshare it, because now it's gotten to the point where other people have meaned it, not in a negative way, but, like, even if it's positive, going into those comments, like, it would be about 50-50. People would say, like, y'all in the comments proving her point right now. But then some people would say, like, oh, this bitch is just saying this shit just so she can get likes, and she don't got no proof, and this is that shit that y'all always, like, trying to divide people for, and blah blah blah. And it was just so much, such an overflow. And especially, as I was saying, since I was just starting out and not used to people talking about me this way on the internet. But yeah, it has a lot to do with what we're taught. It has a lot to do with this protection of Black masculinity that our community has thought has been ripped from us, which it has. Like, there's room to covet it, but covet it if it's you. Like, I think the difference is, and even when we get to conversations about gender identity in classrooms with my students, and I was at a predominantly Black school, as I said before, the young men would get very uncomfortable in their seats when I started talking about gender identities, when I started talking about what all of the alphabet letters meant, like what these different sexual identifications are, what these different gender identifications are. And then we would get to a point where they say, okay, like, I understand. Like, I can accept that. I just don't think it should be introduced to kids, or I just don't think that kids should be able to make these decisions. And a lot of it will come up as like children don't know what they want. And I just think that the way we've been socialized is that children have not been able to decide what they want because parents have made these decisions for them and assumed that their kids are kids. When at the end of the day, in all actuality, kids are the most absorbent. That's why they tell you to put your kids in other languages when they're young because they pick it up so quickly. Like kids are only, or people are only strongly molded in something if that was what was intentionally projected onto them. Like if you explain to a child, well, this person doesn't really identify as either or. Oh, okay, cool. They may wonder about it, but it's not. They don't have hate behind that.
At all.
Like they're not averse to that. But if you teach a child, if you teach a young man that he cannot do anything feminine, like there's some type of PTSD associated with that, that anytime something comes up that is even slightly feminine, oh, that's gay. Oh, I'm not with that gay shit. Like, what? What? So I think it just has a lot to do with the way we indoctrinate our children, our socialization, and this prioritization of preserving black male masculinity at the expense of our children's psychological well-being.
I think that, and I say this all the time, is that there is this pedestal that Black male masculinity must sit on. And
Mm-hmm.
no matter what part of the Black community that you are a part of, all of us have some sort of duty that we feel to uplift that, even within the community, right? Black women feel like we have to uplift that. Black LGBT folks feel like we have to uplift that. And it goes into the culture of trade and why trade is so desirable. And for those people who don't understand trade, because I know that I'll probably get a lot of Lyneezy's listeners, trade is essentially, for the sake of conversation, we're just going to say that it's a DL man, just for the sake of this conversation. It's a lot more nuanced than
Mm-hmm.
conversation. And but when we're talking about this particular type of DL man, this is a man that exudes masculinity, right? And even within the community, there is this need, like, oh, even though there's all of these gay men over here that are living their best life, that are open, that are masculine, there's this need to want to uplift and uphold this boy that has a girlfriend, don't really love her, living with her, but fucking you at 3 o'clock in the morning every night, telling you that he love you, but then you gotta watch him on Instagram. And you're okay with that. And that's become the norm because you feel like what you're doing for him is protecting his masculinity. And I think that that is the same thing with,
Wow.
as Black women, there's this need to uphold this idea of masculinity, even at our own expenses. And so even though the shit that you're doing is toxic, it's hurtful, it's harmful, I don't like it, and it's happening to me, because in my mind, this is what makes a man, and I would rather you be a man than be a pussy or be a little bitch. I'm going to deal with the idea that as a woman, I'm going to subject myself to this because at least I can say that I have a man. I gotta, I have a real Black man, real Black men do that, and you deal with it. And there's been like this new thing that's been going through my mind, like all of our old school songs, the ones that we love, like Mom and them play, around the house on Saturdays and all that stuff, like Cleanup Woman. That is the most trash ass song that, like, I'm just like, that is the most trash ass song to be out here telling Black women, like, that you're the cleanup woman for this trash ass man who don't care about either one of y'all. And because this other woman had the strength to be able to say, I'm not going to subject myself to this. I'm going to come in and be the cleanup woman. And y'all young girls don't know nothing about that, enduring that pain in order to keep a man. And I'm listening to a lot more of our old school music. And I'm like, this was the messaging. This was the messaging to young Black women that had to have those, hey, Barbara, it's Shirley conversations, and that was the norm, and that was okay. And it's not. We're indoctrinating that into each other. And then I think as it pertains to trans women, there is this need to use that same toxic masculinity to justify your womanhood, which you don't need. And I think once I learned that, I was able to really put away all of the stereotypes of what people were telling me that I should, love and fall in love with and have and sort of hold on to. And I was able to realize that I actually don't really care for ridiculously overly masculine men. I like masculinity. It's one of the things that turns me on. However, I need a Lenny Kravitz. Y'all can keep the I need a Luka Saba. Y'all can keep Omarion. Like I need somebody that I can laugh with and joke with and be like, bitch, you so stupid. And it's not like the day is ruined because he's like, I ain't no bitch. I keep telling you know, like I don't have time for the conversations about how you have to remind me or you feel like you need to remind me that I'm not your homegirl, but you're my lover. And so I'm comfortable. And so in any space where I'm comfortable, I should be able to have a slip up and it not be a thing. We should be able to unpack this versus make it an argument. And then I feel like I have to shrink myself for the rest of the day to make you feel like the man that I know you are, that we both know that you are in this space. And I think that that's the unfortunate part for a lot of Black women in general. When I hear a lot of these stories, I was guilty of being like, yeah, as Black trans women, like this is what's happening. And a lot of my Black sisters was like, nah, girl, like that's happening to all of us. Like I've been in that situation too. Like I've allowed somebody to make me feel small, you know, or I've allowed myself to shrink in order to make him feel big for the rest of the day because I made a little slip up or whatever the case may be. So I think that Black male masculinity, like upholding trophy that we have, that's something that we got to unpack. And especially, I think as Black women, there has to be, like I definitely agree with you. And I think you called out something that I hadn't thought about, which is there's room for them both to live. There's room for us to uphold the idea that yes, Black masculinity and masculinity in Black men is, you know, it's a little flippant. We losing it. We're searching and we're scratching at these surfaces looking for it. But I think that there is space to say that I don't think that it's because it's gone. I think that it's because it's transforming. And what we know or what we knew as Black masculinity, that toxicity, that cleanup woman mentality, that Barbara is Shirley mentality is slowly dying because these men are out here like, I'm getting myself well. I'm going to therapy.
But I also I just want to be clear in saying it's not even that I don't feel like today that there's a lack at all in Black male masculinity. I just think that for good reason, Black families have coveted that thing because of the emasculation that happened during slavery, because of the emasculation that happened in the Reconstruction when black men were not able to get as high paying jobs and Black women turned into breadwinners. But only because the umbrella of society in which we are in prides masculinity and patriarchy. That's the only reason. I don't feel like the more that I learn, the more that I see, the more that I hear, the more that I read, masculinity and femininity, it exists on a spectrum for everybody. I even think sexuality exists on a spectrum for everybody. And the only reason that we're so hell bent on these binary ideas of it is because of what we've been trained to think like. And I just think now is a new era to retrain our minds. So, I agree with everything that you just said. I just wanted to be clear in saying, I think there's room for both, for people to pride themselves in masculinity, especially if you're a cisgender, masculine presenting man. If that's who you are, then that's who you are. Just mind your business, you know? At the end of the day, just mind your business.
Mind your motherfucking goddamn business, bitch.
Yes.
But I definitely agree with that. I do want to, I'm not sure if you were able to see it. But I did an interview with the Grapevine a couple of months back. And in this interview, I sat with a bunch of phenomenal Black trans women and we talked about just the woes of womanhood and the way that those things showed up. And what I found was that when I finally got a chance to speak after listening to a lot of the thought processes of my sisters was just that there was a lot of pain and trauma around the ways in which trans women had socialized our associations with cis women. And that was coming out in the ways in which a lot of my sisters were talking. And I didn't necessarily agree with it. And then I had another conversation on Angelica Ross's show. And once again, when I brought up my points about the idea of empathy and understanding that there is a plight for Black women, and especially dark-skinned Black women, that needs to kind of sort of be understood, there was just this, once again, this slight pushback. A lot of the pushback that I got, though, on this very public level was from other Black cis women who felt like I was pandering to them. While there were a lot of them that felt like, no, Hope gets it, like Hope understands it, there's intersectionality in this, there's empathy in this, or Hope gave me a sense of empathy that I did not have with these statements. I think that there were so many Black cis women that are trying to be very intentional about their allyship, that they miss the idea that you too, as a Black cis woman, do deserve a space where you get to be mad, upset, feel, and process whatever the fuck it is that you feel the need to process, so long as it doesn't cause harm, pain, or destruction to, another class of people. But I do think that there's a space that should be held where Black women who are cis should be able to say things that are not PC. And especially when those things are coming from a place of, I need to express this because as a Black woman, I don't have anywhere else to express these things. And I can't express these things any other place. And so I need you to know that it's coming from a place of misunderstanding and love at the same exact time. And should be able to say those, because I feel like there are spaces where as Black trans women, we are given space to say whatever the fuck we want to say in that moment. And people are understood that it's just because, okay, well, they are a marginalized group of people. There is pain that comes with that. There is hardship that comes with that. There are all these things that come with that. And so I'm going to understand. And one of the main comments that I get all the time from some of my Black cis girlfriends, or just Black cis women that I sit in conversation with, is, Hope, you're one of the first people that have allowed me to kind of sort of say the things or ask the questions without vilifying me. And I think my question to you is, have you had those moments where you've tried to have those conversations and you felt vilified? And what are some of the questions that you want to ask in this moment, maybe that I'm presenting this space?
Well, what I can say is, to be honest, I'm trying to think so I don't overlook anyone, but I think I really only had one sit down conversation with one other trans woman in my life. That was when I was at Spelman, and there was a trans woman who was a student at Morehouse because she had to be, the way things were set up. And I had an organization, and we were doing a campaign on sexual assault. And I sat down with her and I just asked her questions about her experience at Morehouse. And while she didn't have a lot to give to the conversation about experiences with harassment or anything like that, what I got from the conversation was a lack of feeling desired, which brought a new empathy out of me that I didn't really even know I could experience. Kind of what you just said about what people may say about you, but it just brought up this whole new thing. Like, this woman may not be being spat on, or she's definitely getting the eye roll, she's definitely getting the uncomfortable stares, the uncomfortable being around. And she worked in the cafeteria, and she said she definitely had to deal with people every day making her feel like she was not wanted there. But on the other side is a different type of trauma she's experiencing. And so I bring that up because there was definitely a change in my trajectory and understanding queer communities, but also to say that I'm guilty. I don't know if I'd say the word guilty, but guilty of having a pretty much cis circle, you know. And when you don't have people in your circle, you don't get to ask questions. You don't get to become witness to experiences that deepen that ability to empathize and understand. So, no, I haven't had too many conversations where I felt vilified, but I've seen enough to know, or heard enough to know, or feel like I can. And if I want to understand something, that I need to go do the research, that I need to go watch some documentaries, or that I just need to do the work myself, which I can understand, because as marginalized people, we all require allies to go and do the work. But also, like, I'm very wary about asking questions. I'm very wary about saying anything on Twitter. I don't really have a big following on Twitter, but Twitter is usually where people have like longer conversations and put a lot of input from different perspectives. But I'm just very wary of that. And even sometimes when I'm making the videos and it has something to do with queer folk, I try not to make statements that I feel project my understanding of their experience on it, because I don't want to say something and then be vilified. So basically saying the culture has definitely made me think that I can't be vocal, that I have to take a back seat and listen. And my own curiosities, I have to kind of just feel out for myself, because it's no trans person's job to open their own life experiences and give me just kind of like a look through the book. You know, I also feel like that's a form of objectification. You know, So yeah, like, I mean, but I definitely have tons of questions. Honestly, I didn't think too much on them because I didn't want this conversation to be like, so I was wondering. Um, but yeah, I guess I could start by asking, like, what advice would you give to an ally about being effective? Like, what are the do's and don'ts? I'm pretty sure you have a lot of this conversation. So if you feel like you're being repetitive for your audience, don't feel obligated. But yeah, just some general advice.
I always tell people that especially when you're in conversation with new people, my audience will live. They'll live. It's about being
Mhm.
a new audience. And I think that question is always my favorite question because it's about intentionality. It's not about the idea of whether or not you have the will to do it. It's about your intentions behind doing it, right? And so when you are seeking to be an ally, when you're seeking to reach out to people, and matches the reason for why you're actually getting up or why you're dialing that number or why you are walking over to that person. I think that folks, especially queer folk and especially Black trans women, we can smell somebody using us for an opportunity a
Mm.
mile away versus somebody who is genuinely trying to learn. Or if you are seeking out trans people for opportunity, I just made a video on my page where, I had somebody who I went to college with, never spoke to this person, never had a relationship with this person, actually, heard through the grapevine that this person was very not fond of me. And
Mm.
they hit me up asking me to be a part of their podcast on some very like run of the mill flimsy shit. And when I said no, because I didn't have the time, they went from following me to unfollowing me and they left me on red, even though I had offered resources. And so be mindful of the fact that just because you think that somebody is not interested in accepting an opportunity does not mean that they're not paying attention to the ways in which your intentions show up. When
Mm.
that person sent me that DM, my senses went off and I said no, not because I wasn't really busy, but because I knew it was bullshit. And I
Mm.
wanted to offer the resources just to see if my intuition was right. And
Mm.
so when I offered those resources and I went back and saw that my message was read, and then I went back and saw that I had been unfollowed, I was like, yep, my intuition was right. And so don't ever think for a second that when you're reaching out for these opportunities that we don't check, that we're not paying attention, that just because somebody dismisses you in that moment, that they're not paying attention to the way that you move afterwards. Because sometimes I say no to people just to see if they're still going to do it without me. I said no because I wanted to see if you were going to take those resources or if you were just going to go get another trans person. And then I could listen to that episode and say, you know what, I think that was great, or I felt like that was a great conversation, or here's where I feel like y'all could have done better on that conversation, but I'm so happy that you had it. And so be intentional about the ways in which you approach people, and especially when we're talking about approaching Black trans women, and especially if you are a Black cis woman, because I think that there's so much unnecessary ass tension there already for absolutely no
Mm.
reason, that we both come at any conversation that we have with each other with an unknown person, at least, with all of this like hesitation and I'm not sure how to take you. And so the best way to be an ally is to come bearing yourself as you are in that moment with your allyship. I don't care if you know all the right words to say, the very first time that we talk. I don't care if you understand, the deep depths, darks of the LGBTQIA plus community. All I care about is your intention to be malicious, or do you truly want to learn, or do you truly want to offer space for me to be able to tell my story in a way that's going to be impactful? So that's like my number one thing. Also, if you have access, which I think that a lot of the time, and this is usually more so on the side of our white allies, if you have access to something and all you're offering the trans person or the the LGBT person is a minute portion of that access, but you literally have the power to kick the entire door down,
Mm.
then don't offer us anything,
Mm.
right? Because that's another thing that we are very, cognizant of, is the idea that I'm being walked in through the back door, but there are other people who you offer this opportunity to that got a chance to sit front row and then get backstage passes. And so if you know that you can't offer the same things to trans people for whatever reason, or to LGBT people for whatever reason, then don't offer your access in ways that are minute or in ways that are not going to match up with the way that you've offered them in the past. I think that is trash. And once again, people that are in the community are not stupid. And I think lastly, when you're talking about donations, don't give your money to these bureaucratic organizations that don't do anything to serve the people that are supposed to be getting these funds. And that includes HRC, that includes Gilead, that includes GLAD. When those people get these millions of dollars to help support Black trans women, we don't see any of that. When I call them out quite frequently when we're talking about the fact that just this past year, HRC had an entire fucking award ceremony and, awarded Naomi Campbell, when there are activists and grassroots workers that are actually doing the work and need to be recognized for the work that they have done, and the amount of stress and strain that they put on their bodies. But you're going to give an award and you're going to fly in this person that could buy the hotel that she was staying in, like, that doesn't make sense. And then when we're talking about GLAD, they had an entire, show for Beyonce and Jay-Z, and they could literally buy the entire block that y'all had the show on. And you spent all of this money in these fundings that were probably millions of dollars that y'all could have used to fund Black trans-led organizations, that y'all could have used to take Black trans sex workers off of the street, or, help Black trans workers stay safe while they were on the streets. There's so much stuff that could be done to ensure the safety of Black trans women through these LGBT organizations. But rather than, donate that money and put that money into the Black trans-led organizations that are doing the work, we're seeing a lot more of these white gay man-led organizations being, funded and popping up all over the place. We're seeing a lot of the lesbian organizations. We're seeing a lot more of the Black gay male organizations, who are often known for throwing parties and, all of this stuff, like all of these lavish things that don't really affect or help anybody, with research. We see all of that stuff happening. So as an ally, when you want to, fundraise or donate, make sure that you're doing your work and you're doing the research. And that's the thing that I think I love about you the most, is that I continuously keep hearing you say, I do my research. I'm doing my research. I'm going in and I type into the Google, who is doing these things, because when it comes down time to it, just throwing your money at the most, largest name out there does not guarantee that those people are going to be served. And sometimes I think that people are okay with the idea of throwaway activism, which is, well, I gave $100,000 to HRC last year, so you can't. Yeah, but HRC turned around and had a gala for a white trans person in Europe, like not even here. Like they turned around and gave that money to a white organization who has been known to be Trump supporters. Like, so it's one of those things where it's like, I think intentionality is the entire form for all three of those things, but then also being able to do your research and understanding that we're not stupid. And that if you're going to donate your funds, that you need to be intentional about where they're going and who they're serving.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for that. And a lot of what you said as you're talking, I'm like, okay, this seems like more common sense and more common sense and more common sense. But again, for a lot of people, I think, like I said, I have a bubble of cis people. We live in these cis friends. We live in these silos. And so even the things that are most rudimentary or fundamental, we might not think of in our day-to-day thinking. And so I have a grasp. And I guess the last question I want to ask you is if you could identify a top 5 issues Black trans women specifically are facing or need to get more word out in cis communities about, what would those be? And I'm going to write them down.
So first and foremost, this is Trans Awareness Week. I'm not sure when this episode will actually air, but this week, is Trans Awareness Week. And one of the things that we need folks to know, and especially what we need Black men to know, is that y'all need to stop killing us. Mm-hmm. And that's just that on that. That's just, period. Black men need to stop killing Black trans women, and especially to save and protect your reputation and your ideology of what masculinity is supposed to present itself as. The misconception is oftentimes that trans women are tricking these Black men into relationships or into these spaces, and then we thus deserve to be killed because we shouldn't be tricking people. That ain't true. Mm-hmm. 8 times out of 10, that's not true. Especially in 2020, I'm gonna go ahead and say probably 9.3% of the time out of 10, that's not true. These men know exactly what they want. They know exactly what they're getting into. And especially if you're talking about trans women that are pre-op, you can fake a lot of things, sis, but what you can't act like you didn't see was somebody's penis during a sexual encounter. And so the idea that people are defending the murders of trans women based on this false ideology, especially when you know that there was sex involved. You can't trick somebody and have sex with them and say that you didn't see this thing that is clearly, you know, a staple part of the sexual experience. I think another number two would probably be healthcare. Trans people are not out here just trying to like get boob jobs and get BBLs and all of those things done because they're vanity projects. We're doing it because those things keep us safe. Those things help us pass and maneuver through the world in ways that help us to be able to get a job and not have people all up in our face. Those things are things that help us be able to secure housing and not have our landlord want to put us out because they've clocked us. Those things help us go to the freaking movies and be able to just enjoy the movie without people making all of these assumptions about me, you know, the entire time, or possibly harassing me while I'm just trying to do something fun like everybody else. And so what I think I need for people to understand is that trans healthcare and trans surgeries are not because we are just so gung-ho and ready to put ourselves through years of pain, but it's because of the years of pain that we go through socially if we don't do those things. If we don't go get a boob job, then I have to deal with 50,000 guys telling me that I'm a big man and in a wig, you know, and all these other things. If I don't go and get a BBL, then I have to worry about the ways in which women look at me when I'm in, you know, this space because they can tell I have boy dips and all of these other things. If I don't go and get my vaginoplasty or all of these other things, you know, then when I'm in these particular spaces, you're going to disvalue my womanhood because you're going to say, well, you didn't even go all the way. So you can't really truly believe that you're a woman. And while a lot of these surgeries for trans women who want to be binary and who want to maneuver through the world in that way are, you know, a drop in the bucket, it's just kind of like, I'm going to do what I got to do. For a lot of trans women who don't want to live in that binary space and just want to identify in their truth, those are some of the most painful decisions to have to make. And so the idea that we have to fight for healthcare because people are saying that these are vanity projects and that we don't need these things, while also turning around socially and saying that we need these things to be respected, is bullshit. Right? Don't say, oh, I would respect it more if you didn't look like this. But then when I need to go and pay for the things to make me look like you say I need to look, you want to give me attitude about it. That's not how that works. Accept trans women as they are, or help us pay for the things that we need so that society can be more comfortable. Because essentially, a lot of the time, it's not for our comfort. It's for the comfort of people around us. I think that another number three would have to be, don't negate the idea that colorism happens within the trans community as well.
Okay.
There is power and privilege in being the India Moores of the world. There is power and privilege in being the MJ Rodriguez's of the world. There is power and privilege in being the Nikita Dragons of the world. There's power and privilege in that. And not just because of passability, but because of the idea to appear and to be exotic. When we see the amount of coverage that, you know, India has gotten versus the amount of coverage that Angelica has gotten. Even though we are having this constant conversation about Angelica's performance as Candy and the way that that made us all feel, the person that's booking all of these gigs and getting all these movie deals and all of this stuff ain't Angelica. And while she's getting her piece of the pie, we know that there should be more that's coming from that. And so don't ever think that just because we're trans that there's a leg up and that, you know, people forget all of these other nuances that come along with it. Because as Black trans women, we're still Black women. And especially to these white people that don't give a shit about your transness, all they see are Black bodies. And so there is still this upholding of the Black bodies that look exotic. There's still this upholding of those Black bodies with the loose curly hair versus the kinky fro. There's still this upholding and this need to remind dark-skinned Black trans girls that we ain't worth shit either. And so don't ever feel like, you know, just because we're trans that we don't still experience those things and that we're not still experiencing colorism and that we don't still experience tokenism when people feel like it's necessary to have a certain aesthetic on screen, but then most of the time and majority of the time we would be pushed, you know, to the background. Don't ever negate the idea, I guess number 4, that it's not a competition. Trans women are not maneuvering through these spaces to compete with cis women. A lot of us are simply trying to survive and exist. And I think one of the main things that I have to constantly reassure a lot of my cis friends about is the idea that if we step out and I'm doing too much that day, likelihood that it has anything to do with you is usually 0%. It has everything to do with the idea that I got dressed up because this is my armor. And yes, I know we just going to Walmart and you can wear your sweatpants and you can wear a little crop top and throw your hair up in a bun, but there's a different expectation for me. And while you may see me and while you may affirm me, if I don't look like this, the world doesn't. And so I think that a lot of cis women need to understand that sometimes your trans friends are not being extra when they put on their 30-inch weave to go to lunch. They're not being overly dramatic when they wear that dress with all of the rhinestones to somebody else's birthday party. Because I think what a lot of folks need to understand and realize is that when people see trans women, there's an expectation of what we're supposed to look like. And a lot of us want to prove people wrong so that there's not a conversation about that. Because I would rather you be talking about my sparkly dress at somebody else's birthday party than to be talking about whether or not I have an Adam's apple or to be talking about whether or not I've had bottom surgery. I'd rather you be talking about my 30-inch weave than be talking about how big my hands are, and that's how you can tell I'm a man. I would rather you be talking about all of the, my eye makeup and asking me if I'm a makeup artist all night rather than asking me when did I decide I was going to be a woman. And so it's armor. And it's not to show you up. It's not to make you feel like you're less than a woman. It's not to prove that I'm better than you in that space, but it's to protect me from all of the ignorant questions that are sure to come if I don't. But, and I think lastly, one of the things that I want folks to understand socially, and especially like my Black women sisters, is that when we choose not to do those things, it shouldn't be taken as something is wrong with me because I've decided that I want to move against the grain of what I've been told that I have to be in order to be accepted in society. If I decide that I want to shave my head, if I decide that I want to, stop wearing makeup, if I decide that I no longer want to get laser hair removal and I let my beard grow out, like whatever the fuck I decide that I want to do, none of those things stop me from being the woman that I've told you that I am. And so respect those things and keep your curiosity, right? Keep your curiosity in our circle forever flowing. If we have that type of relationship and if we've opened up that door and if we've opened up a space where I can talk to you and you can talk to me, don't ever assume for me. Always come to me and ask me about what's going on and never assume that I have to perform a certain way in order to be respected a certain way. Because I think that that's something in some of my friendships that when people started to see me, like there was like 2 months that have just passed where I was wearing nothing but braids. I didn't really feel like wearing makeup. I didn't put it on. I didn't whatever. But even like I told you before we started, like I just felt it today. Today I felt blue hair. Today I felt makeup. Today I felt whatever. And tomorrow I might feel my TWA and some Cantu butter. And that all of those things are okay. Yeah. But it's also okay if we are friends to say like, okay, so does this mean something different? Because I want to make sure that I'm constantly in respect and in alignment with the way that you want to be seen. So is this something else or are we still good? I think that curiosity within friendship is also a really super powerful thing, but not holding people to this particular standard based off of what you think you know about them, is going to be a good tool for everybody in the end. So those are my 5 things.
Thank you so much. No, that was really insightful, and just even your thinking about some of those things, like considering things to be armor, considering things not to be done for self-gratification, but for as a defense mechanism,
right,
if anything, and just like it compounds my understanding of what the intersectionality is like. It's not just about work or pay. It's not just about being accepted in the workplace. It's not just about all of these different, I guess, systematic or structural things that trans women have to face, but also just what goes on inside and the things that are done to protect, your mental health. So I just think that's amazing, and I really appreciate you for sharing that with me.
I thank you so much for being able to share this entire space and give me some of your time and your intellect and all of your Black woman magic in your mind. And I just want to, the last question that I want to ask is, how is your mental health?
How's my mental health, girl? It's on the way. It's on the way. I recently had a moment of, I don't want to say it was humbling, but I spiraled just a little bit because in the midst of me chasing and running after my goals, I haven't had to compete with anyone for anything. But something very specific happened and challenged a lot of the little girl in me, who wanted to be seen in certain ways and wasn't. It was wanted to be accepted in certain spaces and wasn't. And dealing with things, accepting the things that I'm not good at, accepting the things that I am good at, and accepting the things that I've just allowed myself to fall off of and that I can't change. So my mother she's been in school for psychology forever. She's back in school again, but she's been pushing mindfulness on me, and I'm just like, Mom, leave me alone, whatever. But just even writing down, taking some time to doodle, you see it behind me. I took some time to doodle and practice mindfulness and writing stuff down and write down the definitions of the 7 attitudes of mindfulness. And it's really helping me get back on the upswing of things, not judging, accepting, doing things with a beginner's mind. And when I tell you, like, I just feel better. I feel lighter. The quarantine and just being at home, also leaving my day job, has me just kind of lounging around, doing work on the computer. Um, so my body not just being as limber and comfortable. So getting back into exercising, eating well, doing better. I'm actively taking a part in taking care of myself, because I think Black women, cis or trans, we are so consumed with changing the world that we forget to take care of ourselves. And it takes a moment for God to sit us down and say, relax,
Girl,
yeah. So that's where I'm at. So it's on the way. Like, I'm happy with where I'm at, and yeah, it's a process.
I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for.
Thank you for offering all of this, offering all of your time. Tell the people where they can find you, anything that you have coming up that you want to promote.
Yeah. So you can find me on Instagram at underscore Lyneezy. It's Lyneezy. That's a nickname one of my friends in college gave me. But go ahead and follow me there. You can follow me at the same on Twitter, which I'm trying to do a little bit more of. But I also have some great things coming out for YouTube. I was just telling Giselle we had to move up the conversation because I'm going to visit a studio space to get a YouTube series on and popping.
Yes.
That I would like to come out. My first episode come out in January. But yeah, just visit the YouTube because more poetry, more visuals are also coming in the works. Yeah, that's just me. Everything you can find is on my link tree in my Instagram profile. So follow me there.
Lady McSmitty. Well, like I say this time and every time, everybody, peace, love, and hope. And thank y'all for listening. Tune in again next week when we'll have another guest that's going to blow us away the same way that Miss Lyneezy did today. Bye, y'all.